Thank God.
The Crow is one such character that has ruled the comic book universe with various narratives. Even the films and shows based on this character have given us some of the most memorable arcs. Over the years, there have been many takes on the character, but recently, one has stood out from the rest. Let's look at Null Narcos, a story that all the other Crows could have had, and the perfect villain that the other Crows didn't have to face. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Not your average crow, unveiling the Null Narcos mystery. Before we dive into the tale of this particular crow, let's look at this character's original concept. Created by James O'Barr, the basic premise of the crow involves a person who undergoes a tragic death, along with his loved one. After this person is killed, they are brought back to life by a crow to take revenge for their death and the death of their loved ones. After fulfilling this purpose, they are reunited with their loved ones in purgatory. While this is the basic premise of the character, over the years, various renditions of this story have given unique arcs for the crow. While the first story had a male crow, the third rendition of this tale saw a female crow with the story of Iris Shaw. Even though the general focus was given to changing the tragic story behind the character, stories have explored the mythology of the resurrection and what might happen if the resurrected person doesn't fulfill his purpose. Null Narcos is the crow who didn't fulfill his purpose, and this led to a heavy price as he was trying to live an everyday life, suppressing the memories of his tragic death and the loss of this loved one. He ended up facing another such being associated with vultures, and his purpose is to bring pain to those who don't fulfill the purpose of the crow. Issue number 1, Lethe, the River of Forgetfulness. We are introduced to the crazy acts of the Freak Chic Circus sideshow as we witness Lady Combustible light the stage with fire and then bring Null Narcos and Bengali, the Tiger Woman, to the stage. Null Narcos is called the man who knows no pain, and nails are pulled from his head and blood gushes out, but he doesn't show a flicker of pain, while Bengali uses her sharp fingers to slice through his skin. But amidst all this, Narcos is thinking about something completely different. We see him having a vision of a woman tied inside a room, telling him that she's proud of him. After the act, Bengali comes to help Null Narcos with his bandage and talks about how Null sometimes gets lost somewhere during the act. Later, everyone in their group gets together for a party due to the successful run, and Lady Combustible thanks Null Narcos for his world. They sit down to talk, and she tells him that even though he can't remember who he is, he will always have them as family. Lady Combustible stares at the campfire during their conversation and gets lost somewhere. When she returns to the present moment, she asks everyone to continue with their party as she will retire early that night, but she is bothered by something as she stares at the campfire. Somewhere nearby, personnel is cleaning up the grounds where the festival has occurred, but crows keep ruining his efforts by blowing trash along with him. Suddenly, someone pops up in front of him with his mouth covered with blood and throws a half-eaten crow at him. The personnel falls back and starts having a heart attack and asks for help, but the ominous person comes close to him and tells him about body parts that a vulture would like to harvest the most from a corpse. Meanwhile, we see Null Narcos in his caravan, going through several papers about mission people trying to find themselves. Again, the vision of the lady talking to him comes to him, and she is about to take his name when he gets back to his senses, and the sound of a crow fills up the room. He looks for the bird but finds someone sneaking around Bengali's caravan. We go to Lady Combustible, sitting near a fire, talking to someone as if they were there. She tells this person that Narcos is with her now, and she won't let him go easy. But before she can make a move, the person we had seen before with the crows comes in and stabs her with a trash picker. As she falls back, she tells him about the river Lethe from Greek mythology. This river was supposed to make people forget about the weight they carry from their past. Null grabs the person trying to sneak into Bengali's caravan and starts thrashing him, but Stalk stops them as he screams. Benga and Null run towards them to discover Lady Combustible's corpse, with her eyes removed and a trash picker in her hand. Crows are sitting on her head and around her. Issue number 2, Calvin Morgrow. We find the gang near a police station due to the investigation that was going on. Stalker Lee is let go from the investigation because of her missing limbs, making it impossible to pin it on her. The rest of the group sits outside and ponders who amongst Bengali and Null Narcos can be the killer. And since Narcos is the newest among them, it makes them feel that he is the only possible candidate. Inside the jail, a detective presents the scenario to Narcos, which puts him and Benga responsible for the murder. Narcos realizes this is a game that the police will play play with them as they try to convince them to start pointing fingers at each other slowly. But Binga points out that she knows about Narcos' alibi, and he feels that Binga is spying on him. Binga reassures him that she knows he is trying to seek out himself, which she has observed in him for a long time. Narcos hears the crow again and feels that this might mean danger isn't very far, because they found Lady Combustible's body the last time he heard it. They decide to start doing their act inside the jail to get attention, but Narcos gets the visions again, and this time he can see a cult talking about killing him and the woman as the latter is dragged away with her hands tied. These people are just about to take his name when Narcos wakes up. The cops rush in to stop them, and Narcos uses the opportunity to fight them and tie up the detective. The duo rush out of the station and ask the others to start the truck, but before they can rush out, the mysterious killer strikes Geek and takes out his eyes too. As he starts going towards the car, Narcos takes a pole, stabs him, and uses his body to pole vault into the truck. Once on the truck, he tells Binga that he isn't looking for himself in the newspaper cuttings, but instead trying to suppress the memory of his identity. Suddenly, the pole goes right through Narcos' chest, and the killer jumps into the truck and starts going for the twins as his next victim. Narcos wakes up inside a bus in the land of the dead, and the Skull Cowboy comes as the bus conductor and talks to him. He tells him that he has come across a certain Calvin Morgrow, who just like him was a crow, but he had instead used the chance given to him to become a killer. And now, since Narcos is not using his opportunity to kill the 7 people responsible for killing him and his loved ones, Calvin is going to kill 7 of his loved ones instead. Narcos realizes that Binga and the other people from his group are in danger. Narcos returns to the land of the living only to see Calvin going for the twins, and he takes his name. Calvin realizes that Narcos had a chat with the Skull Cowboy, but before he can inquire further, Narcos uses the same pole to stab him again and then attaches the hook on the other end to some wires, which topples him off the truck. Narcos gets the vision again, and this time, he sees that he and his loved ones are investigating a cult called the Bounty of Aristius, who are responsible for killing a lot of girls. And just then, these people enter the room with torches. They set fire to his loved one, and then he is also burnt to mere bones until the crow comes to resurrect him. Narcos comes to his senses and realizes that he has to kill these men so that he can save them. And then a crow emerges from his mouth. He admits that he has to follow the crow to fulfill his purpose. Issue number 3, Purpose Fulfilled. Narcos and the rest of the group arrive at a safe place to lie low before Calvin comes to attack them again. They ask him why Calvin took this long to start going against him, and Narcos realizes that it was because Calvin was waiting for him to make new friends, and make 7 of them so he could have his fill of killings. Binga Lee comes to him and tells him that now she knows what Narcos was looking for when he was lost during their act, and it was only during these intimate moments that the visions of his past life came to him. As they embrace each other, Narcos gets his vision again, and this time he sees that the loved one being burnt is his mother, and his real name is Vincent Tesmer. The police wake up Binga Lee, and they tell her that they know that the killer is Calvin Anthony Morgrow, based on the security camera footage from the events of his attack near the police station. According to them, Calvin was a killer back in 1964, and he is supposed to be 78 years old. They tell her that they are looking for Narcos, and she replies that he has gone to stop Morgrow. Meanwhile, we see Narcos on a motorcycle following the crow while singing a rendition of the song of Sixpence. He reaches a beekeeping farm, and here, inside a farmhouse, we see the people from his vision in a gathering, talking about the last time an attorney was causing them trouble. Outside, Narcos picks 2 burning candles hanging from a tree and heads towards the farmhouse. Suddenly, they discover that the ground is filled with honey. Meanwhile, the detective from earlier takes Binga Lee to Narcos, and on the way, he asks her about the cult Narcos was looking for, but it turns out that the officer himself is a part of the cult, and he points his gun at her. Back in the farmhouse, the confused members of the cult are surprised to see a Narcos standing there with the 2 candles in his hand. He tells them his identity and about his mother, the state attorney's officer prosecutor, and they are shocked to know that he is alive as they had burnt him and his mother. Narcos tells them that he knows that the candles he holds in his hand are made from their body fat only, and uses them to light the honey on fire while continuing to sing his song. He makes sure all of them burn to death and looks into their eyes as they burn, and his body also catches fire. Back at the safe house where the police are guarding the rest of the circus gang, Calvin arrives and kills all of the officers. Narcos' friends ask him how he managed to survive, and he tells them how vultures try to get rid of the bodies of people as they rot away. But sometimes, these bodies manage to survive because of how inhumane these people are. Calvin prepares to kill them with a hook, but something stops him as he realizes that Binga Lee is a lot closer to Narcos than them. He takes the truck and heads over to them. Narcos Narcos gets out of the farmhouse with his burnt body as he slowly starts healing. But right then, the detective arrives, holding Bengali hostage. The detective tells him that he knows what kind of being Narcos was in his previous life, and how he was involved in the group that was responsible for his and his mother's deaths. He presents him with a deal where he will let Bengali go with him if Narcos doesn't kill him. Right then, Calvin crashes his truck and is launched towards Bengali, but fully healed Narcos leaps at him and throws him off. Calvin slices Narcos with the hooks and tells him that he can't be stopped because this is all he exists for. But the detective shoots him from behind. The detective tells Narcos that he can leave with Bengali and will make sure that Calvin is chopped into pieces and buried so that he cannot come after them again. But Calvin seems uninterested in all this and goes in to attack Bengali, so Narcos picks up the detective to shield her, thus making Calvin stab the detective in the eyes. Right when this happens, both Narcos and Calvin start feeling weak. They both kneel, and Calvin starts talking about the River Lethe and how he wishes it was real so that he could have forgotten about his past. Dead vultures surround his body and start tearing it apart. Narcos closes his eyes, and when he opens them, he can hear someone taking his old name. It's his mother, and he runs towards her while the skull cowboy stands behind them with his horse. Back in the land of the living, we see the Most Fest going on in the Freak Chic Circus sideshow, performing their act of presenting Bengali. But this time, we see a spark in Bengali's eyes, the same one we saw in Narcos' eyes when he used to get visions. How deadly is Null Narcos? Now that we have a complete idea regarding Null Narcos, let's compare him with the other crows and figure out how ruthless he is. Most of the other crows got into killing their enemies immediately after their resurrection, but somehow Null Narcos wasn't aware of his purpose, as if there was no one to guide him, even though he had the same powers as Eric Draven, the first rendition of the crow in the comic books. He tried to suppress the memory of his tragedy, which made him weak. Based on the other crows, we are aware that their tragedy and its memory serve as something that motivates them to kill their enemies. However, one thing that made him more substantial than the others was his gang of misfits, who managed to be more understanding than anyone else would have ever been. None of the other crows had such a team, allowing Narcos to play strategically to defeat Calvin. Luckily, Calvin was a villain that none of the other crows had to face, since he stood above Narcos in terms of experience. Narcos' strategy and planning allowed him to save Bengali and get Calvin also killed, since Calvin ended up killing one of Narcos' enemies, which went against his purpose. Considering this, Narcos is above most other crows since he faces a considerably more ruthless enemy than the others. Verdict. Compared to the other graphic novels for the Crow, this one brings something fresh and gives us more insight into the character's mythology. We also get to see Skull Cowboy, whose scenes were deleted from the 1994 film, portrayed by Michael Berryman. This particular story also references a lot of mythological tales that relate to the concept of the Crow, and also the arc of Calvin Morgrow. The Crow Lethe is a perfect take on the Crow and brings a lot more to explore in the world of the Crow in the future. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.